Good afternoon. Welcome to the Graduate School of Design here at Harvard University and the African Landscapes Program. My name is Amber Henry. I am a professor in the Department of African and African American Studies and a core faculty member of the Afro-Latin American Research Institute. I work on questions of the politics of tourism, embodiment, and indigenous formations in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is my honor to moderate our panel this afternoon. I will take a few moments to introduce our three panelists, and then we will give them the floor so they can share their wonderful work with us. Our first speaker is Mounia Bennani, a landscape architect who graduated from the National Graduate School of Landscape in Versailles. She holds a PhD in geography and founded Paysage, a multidisciplinary firm that works on landscape projects at all scales, and currently served as president of the Moroccan Landscape Architects Association. Our second speaker is Ann Gollifer. Ann is a visual artist who was born in the Bennani region of Guyana and has lived and worked in Gaborone, Botswana since 1985. Gollifer's work is a process-based material practice, and she is represented by the Guns and Rain Gallery in Johannesburg, South Africa. Our final speaker is Christa Giraso, who is here in Boston and from doing an MA program. Christa is a landscape designer at Massachusetts Design Group, dedicated to creating thriving ecosystems that inspire and nourish communities. Her work on the Ellen DeGeneres campus of the Dian Fossey Fund and the Rwanda Institute of Conservation Agriculture inspired her to be proactive in the preservation of native green spaces and the design of functional and resilient spaces that serve current and future generations. I am honored to be here with the three of you and look forward to moderating a discussion after your presentations. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage our first speaker. Thank you.
First, I want to thank Garrett for inviting me. Really, I'm very honored to be here. It's my first time in Harvard, my first time in Boston, the city of Olmsted, which I study from France, but I never seen his project. Well, first I want to introduce my presentation. First, I will speak on Morocco, our landscape traditions, history of landscape gardening, but also history of landscape planification of the 20th century. And after, I will share with you some of my projects carried by my agency, Paysage in Rabat. As I told you before, I did a PhD in geography in Versailles in France about the history of landscaping in 20th century, special time under the French protectorate. And this part of the history were unknown before my thesis. So I described this period of our landscape heritage, because now it is recognized as a heritage, as a whole legacy, and not just something we don't know. And now we are in this 21st century writing our new landscape paysage, as we said. So this book was 10 years of working, research between France, Morocco, and I discovered really, I will share with you some historical plan that has never been shown before in the archive of France. First, Morocco. It's very beautiful. It's my country. I'm from Rabat. I born in Rabat. My name is Mounia. Even if I'm not look like a Moroccan, I'm Moroccan. Morocco is known for its very beautiful diversity of landscape. We have a very diversity between the north, which is more temperated, and the south and east, which is more arid climate. We have desert landscapes. So in the north, we have mostly traditional landscape, Mediterranean landscape, due to the ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. When you climb in the mountain, what is particular in Morocco, we have in the middle of the land, we have the Atlas Mountains. And in the Atlas Mountains, it's quietly not humid, but very temperate climate. We have the biggest and oldest trees, which are Cedrus atlantica, which are native from Morocco, from the Atlantic Atlas Mountains. And when we go to the south, to the desert, we find other typical landscape, like with Argania spinosa or Stipa, which are very native plants. And along the river in the desert, we can find our very famous oasis. Morocco is well known for its oasis. I'll share with you also our landscape, our cultivated landscape, linked to our ancestral agricultural traditions. These are pictures from Fegig oasis in the south, in the east, in limit east of Morocco. You can see in a desert climate, very green land, because it exists some water inside in the earth, which is drained, and all the water comes to bassin reservoir, and then they are carried to the plant by ditches, carried from the farmers. And what is very typical in the oasis, you have a system of plantation that permit to protect from the sun and heat. You have three levels of plantation. High trees that protect lower trees. High trees are in general palm trees, Phoenix dactylifera, and the middle stratum, fruits, protects in turns lower stratum, which are in general cereals and vegetable plants. And this typical system of plantation, I still use it in my new projects, because to protect heat, it's the reality, the quotidien. We say we have it every day. We have to face. When we go to the cities, we have another tradition of gardening, more urban gardening, an ancestral gardening according to Arabic Islamic heritage. This is a map from Marrakesh, an old city in the south, in the desert land. And you see, this is the first map designed for the Guide Bleu in 1919, at the beginning of the French protectorate. And they did it to make the tourism go to Morocco. And this is very beautiful map, because you see just the old city, the Medina, and you also, you see the old city surrounding with its rampart. You see the palm grove on the north, very large garden outside the Medina. These are all the traditional gardens. I just want you to see this largest garden in the south, which is called Agdal Garden. You have a picture in 1920s. You see a large bassin, 4 hectares of bassin, and this garden is 450 hectares. It's quite the same dimension as the Medina. we didn't invent this park system or the city garden. Marrakech was still a city garden before the French protectorate came. And this was very important because they understood this French. They analyzed it, they described it, and then they just keep all this heritage and they protect it. It was very new at this time. Then I want to share with you that inside the Medina, you have several gardens. The most are what we call riyad, which are enclosed garden, protected inside the houses. And in the middle, you find generally a fountain. Outside, you have more cultivated garden to feed the city, and these two old gardens. I just want you to see this line, this parallel line. Everything, the city, the garden, the Medina, following this parallel line. This parallel line are the drainage khatara, which are the ancestral drainage gallery that brings the water from the Atlas Mountain in the south and to feed, to serve, and to irrigate all the garden first and the Medina. And I show you how it is done. This is our Agdal garden from the 12th, 10th, 11th century. It's very old garden. It's almost the largest garden in the Arabic Muslim world today. And it's a World Heritage. For 450 hectares, we don't even planify it today. We don't know how to do it. And it was done naturally to feed and to live in the desert. This is the system of the Khatara that brings the water from the high Atlas Mountain in the south, in the 30 kilometer. You see the direction that follows all the Medina, the gardens, the structures, southwest to the northeast. And all you see the Medina and the big garden, which is the Atlas Garden, surrounded by the palm grove. In the desert, all this green was made it possible with the Khatara. Khatara is an underground. You have a schematic of this Khatara, which are an underground gallery that captured the water from the subsoil, and punctually there are some wells for the maintenance and aeration. And all the waters follow a sloping terrain and follows the gravity. Then they go to large bassin from the Agdal, then to irrigate the different part of the garden first, and then the Medina, the houses, and the fountains. Unfortunately, today we have more than 7,100 kilometers of gallery and 650 khatara, but they are inactive now because we have no water more in the subsoil. Well, there was the traditional landscape before the French protectorate came. When the French came, they drew very interesting map just to describe what exists. And the difference between Morocco and the others colonial, it was a protectorate, it's not the same. They protected the Medina, the old city, the difference in Tunisia or Algeria, and they will build the new modern city outside the Medina. They keep all the heritage they describe, they analysis, and they there I will take the example of Rabat, which has been designed as capital of the modern Morocco in 1914. By the French protectorate. It was not a capital. Maréchal Lyoté, which was the first resident in Morocco, decided to experiment in Rabat new idea, new models of town planner, according to green, to health, to modernity. And he went in Paris and he asked for a landscape and a town planner, Jean-Claude Nicolas Forestier, who knew Olmsted and who was inspired of Olmsted's park system. And he writes a book in 1906, Park System, but in France he cannot do this park, execute his park system. Then the Marshal Lyoté asked him to experiment his theory of park system in Rabat, in Morocco, and that's what it will be done. Rabat, when the French came, they find what? Made 2 medinas. These are original maps I discovered in the archive of Académie d'Architecture in Paris. They were very new at this time. 2 medinas, walls, some gardens, landmarks. Landmarks are what? Old gardens, mosque, but also topography. The river surrounding the east, the limit east of is the Borrego Valley, and you have the ocean in the north. But inside you have just wall, landmarks, and a topography. A topography with undulation that gives some belvedere. And this was very interesting because Forestier will understood all this physical description and from the landscape, but also all the heritage, to the legacy. And they give a little book with 30 pages describing and giving some prescription for these new towns. And for Rabat, he recommended to preserve all this heritage and to draw, and he drew a completely system of park based on what? Because they were nothing, just landmarks. Based on landmarks, based on topography only. So this map is the map drawn by the architect Henri Prost, who take forestry prescription and execute the prescription of Forestier. This is like an Olmsted park system. It was designed in advance before the city, the new city, is developed. Then what we see is very remarkable. It was amazing. I think it's a beautiful, most beautiful plan I've never seen. Also today, I don't know if I can draw such a very representative and expressive plan. You see a red streets, but the streets are linking what? Not quartier, as a built city, they link gardens, open spaces. First, the open spaces were designed, and they were designed where I told you we have Belvedere. All the open, the places where we have a beautiful view, they preserve them and they draw the garden and public spaces there. Then we have today a very special park system. You see the arrows? They are designing the most beautiful view of the city, but nothing is built. This is really particular to Rabat. Sorry, I just want to see you. This is the first garden, which is Jardin d'Essai, the first public garden created before the city built up around it. You see the garden, and over in the background another garden, which is Belvedere Garden. All the garden would have the name in relationship with the view. Belvedere Garden, there we have there a triangle de vue, meaning the form of the view, and it is very particular. This is the first garden I saw you before. It's Jardin d'Essai, which was drawn by Jean-Claude Nicolas-Forestier. I've never seen this map before, but I discovered it in Rabat, in the archive of the Bibliothèque Nationale. Then now we have a real legacy in Morocco, designed by a French. And we have the French landscapes at this time invented a new way of designing a public garden, because public garden, you saw, that was agile garden or to food, for agrément, but just urban garden doesn't exist like we see them now. You have a mixed French and traditional garden. French with all the big, large perspective, Moroccan with the system of terrace that are inspired by traditional terrace, and system of fountains that irrigate by gravity each part of the terraces. That was very a mixture of two cultures, and it was typical from Morocco. Inspired, because Forestier were in Seville, in Grenade, he was inspired also by the Spain Arabic Muslim garden he discovered in the south of Spain. Another style, quite garden, which is completely different. It is the garden of the first resident Maréchal Yoté. You see, it's really a French style. Why is French style? Because design created on the bottom of the city, it's like to express the power of the colony. Then the garden expressed also the relation between policy and art of garden. And this is really remarkable, and the only one in Morocco in the pure French style. Now, we have all these park system today, which exactly were created as it was planified 100 years before. It's exactly. And they are the most important garden open spaces in the inner city of Rabat. They form a green now. They form a green corridor that links the other city of Rive Droite of the Bourg-Grec, and you see here the perspective of this green corridor with our new urban landmark, which is the Mohammed VI Tower, which is one of the highest tower in Africa. I go back to Marrakesh. Marrakesh, we have, you see, on the left, the original drawing of Proust in 1512. You see, nothing is new because all was done. The network of open spaces, our garden, where still exist. They just do recommendation to preserve the beautiful perspective in the south on the Atlas Mountains, and also this is the network of the green city today. It was the same as it was before. You see, just this avenue, this main avenue, planted avenue, were designed to link the different part of this old garden heritage and to make the city completed just by this avenue. And all this avenue gives a perspective on a natural landmark or on natural or architectural heritage. For example, the main avenue Mohammed VI gives a very nice view on the south, as I told you, but also to the north, or this little hill called Jebel Ghiziz. Perpendicular, you have another one avenue which links an old garden to the inner city with a perspective on the Koutoubia. Then you see the landmarks are the basis to design the new city. at the beginning, at the French Protectorate. Now I will share with you just for some of my projects. One of the latest one there, 150 hectares in the south, where the project was to transform an old orchard of olive grove that was planted after the independence by young Moroccan. That's why they called it Rabat Shabab. It means young forest. And the project challenge was, they told me, just create a park. Yes, okay, but how I will create a park with olive grove and agricultural activity, because they still use the olive and there still exists some watering of traditional watering, agricultural watering. Well, I said, I will see. Then I did my job as a landscaper. I went and discovered what exists and analyzes what was at the beginning. So this is the plan of the project. We find this geometrical pattern of the trees, olive trees, but there were also empty spaces that we have to restore because they were damaged. We create a network of pedestrian walk punctuated by some sports stops, some educational rest stop, and we find that was very, we discovered something very new. There were some khatara there, and we didn't even know what to do with this inactive khatara. This is the existing site with the geometrical pattern of 10 meters, but also the empty spaces to be restored. This is the pedestrian walks we created, really using natural materials. We wanted really to be integrated in the nature, in existing nature, and the red-brown color of Marrakesh. On the right, we have to integrate also the traditional seguia that were used by the farmer. It was very still difficult, but very interesting. This is some of the places, the rest stops, the sports stops, the pergola we did, the signals, with all the materials. You use the stones, local stones, wood, bricks that exist, and all is integrated. We don't have so color. We're still on the natural earth colored. And for the space we have to restore, we didn't just plant olive. We wanted to restore an ecosystem by planting native plants and mixing to adapted local plants like argana trees, carob trees, acacia. And this is a picture of five years after. And really, it's very nice. I go faster. This is now, we use drip water to irrigate because there's no, the water, the khatara doesn't work. And this is another project, completely different, very modern. It was the restoration of a historical velodrome in Casablanca. And it was the same, new uses, new functions, and enclosed area. We opened it, and now people cross there, and they go sports just to have a rest for children, old people. Another project is New Garden of Ben Gurir. I was inspired by Rabat, the network of open spaces. It was a new city built outside Ben Gurir in the desert. I told them, well, just plant at the beginning, we can plant. It doesn't cost. The trees are very small. They don't need a lot of water. And we did it. We planted 40 hectares. At the beginning, there were nothing. And now we have a well-developed forest. And the first buildings are coming with an ecosystem, more coolness, a soil more in the better quality. Well, I have just quickly 2 other projects. This is an orchard in Rabat, which was transformed into a residential area. You see before these old fences, agricultural fences, and after. We kept all the fences, agricultural fences, to structure the area residence, and we plant new trees, mixed trees, horticulture, and forest trees. Now I have 10-year-old these trees, and I'm very happy to see them because they give some shadow, some coolness. We let the spontaneous grass grow under the trees, and we have really, I like it because we have a natural landscape that moves with the time. And the last one, sorry, I want to finish with my first project, and you can see it on Arte in this beautiful report I did. Well, I invite you to watch it. It is an old garden, traditional garden that inside the Medina of Fez. You know, the Medina is the largest Medina in the world, and was inside completely. It was an old imperial private garden crossed by the main river of Fez, which is the river of Wet Fez, that crosses the garden and subdivides into 4 rivers. We have 2 parts, traditional part and with an Andalusian garden, and in the south, a bassin stockage that serves to stockage the water from the wet and to irrigate the garden. This garden was transformed at the beginning of the 20th century by the French landscape, who transformed this private palace into a public spaces. And this was new, to open something private to the public. You have the first original plan, and the plan I drew in 20 years ago. I respected really the exact original plan, and I just transformed and added some new plants, some new materials. You see, this garden, for me, it's the one who maybe I like it the first because it's very popular. Everybody goes there. I don't show you the before and after, the rehabilitation of the river and so on. But the most important thing are the people. Everybody goes there. They feel like it's their garden. It's inside the Medina, and in the Medina, the people don't have any garden and open space. And everybody goes there, they sit, they learn, they play, they feel insecurity, they feel fresh, coolness. And for me, it's really representative of our public space in Morocco. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ann Gollifer. I first of all want to say thank you to Gareth for inviting me. And it's a very big honor, and I'm a little nervous. But anyway, let me just find out where everything is. Okay, great. Start with this one. I'm a visual artist, and my practice is based on working with earth, the earth colors. And I started this this movement away, or narrowing my practice in 2018. And in a way, it was inspired by the idea that the earth colours represent all the colours of humankind. And I found that really interesting. And also, I started working with watercolour, in a way thinking about the environment and about preserving the environment and having respect for the environment, and making sure that my work showed what I believed in. So I've lived and worked in Gaborone, Botswana since 1985, long time. And yeah, Ooh, I'm so nervous. Yeah, I've lived there since 1985, and it's my home. I'm a permanent resident, but I'm not African. So working with the earth pigments or earth colours, I have to have access to those colours, and I have to do it with respect as a guest. So what happens is I have become acquainted with and become close to the communities that work with colours, and they are there, although before I started working with the earth, I didn't realise that there are practitioners who still use the earth colours in their everyday lives. So what happened was, during COVID, we were all locked in, and I had bought pigment from London and Johannesburg, and I had started to mix my own colours with gum arabic to make my own watercolour, and I ran out of pigment. And then the lockdown was over, and with a friend, I went to Mounia, which is a traditional town 50 kilometres outside of Gaborone, the city, to the Putatakobo Museum, where I had worked in 1985, 86, 87, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. I was telling Sichaba, it's one of the sites of the rain snake and rainmaking. Anyway, so I went there, and I was in the museum, and I saw these earth cakes, and it was like a moment of, I don't know, like the sun shone through the ceiling, and I was enlightened. And I thought, wow, I can use the earth in Botswana, and I will figure out how to do that. And so I spoke to the custodians of the museum, and they said that if I came back the following week, they would take me to some different public collection sites. So that happened. And in a yellow riverbed, I saw a woman collecting yellow earth. And I said to her in Setswana, "Wa direng." And she said to me in English, "What are you doing?" And we sort of instantly became friends. And her name is Motse Nkwemabala, and this is a picture of her. And she invited me to her home, where she has built her own clinic. She is a spiritual healer, and she deals with women's problems, women and children's problems, and she's a masseur. So she uses massage and touch to heal. And she uses the earth from termite hills to build the clinic. She builds it herself. It's her size and shape. Just want to go on to the next slide. This is a termite mound where people can collect the red earth. And it is, I was asking someone about the spiritual, about the significance. I'm beginning to ask about the spiritual significance of colours, or the significance of colours. And I said, why are termite mounds so, why is there a thing about termite mounds? And the person I was speaking to said, well, the earth comes from deep, deep down. It's stunning colour in this slide. And often when you see termite mounds, it tells you what colour the earth is underneath. But they said the ancestors are there. That's where the oldest ancestors abide. And when you bring them to the surface and you use that colour, they're very happy. And they will then give a lot of blessings to the endeavours that happen with the use of them. And so they said, that's why you're blessed. That's why you're going to Harvard. Because they're happy. So And then just to show you different collection sites, this site is on the Putu de Kobo Hill, and I was anxious about us. Well, I was there with the museum staff, and I said, "Isn't this like a sacred place because it's the hill?" And they said, "It is and it isn't." It's an interesting thing that the deepest spiritual and special places are also ordinary places. They're in daily life, in a sense. So this is Motse's house. This is her clinic, actually, and this is what she built herself. And I love it because it's just a little bit higher than her. She's tall. And you can see that she uses ochres to decorate and plaster the house. And it's a traditional building. It's the way that you protect the earth bricks that she makes from the termite earth. And she uses the termite earth particularly because of its significance and its relationship to the ancestors. And her house that she lives in with her children and her husband is right behind over there. And it's a modern house. It's cement, has a metal roof. And I said, so what's the difference between that house that you live in and then your clinic? And she said, well, I use things that the ancestors like, the termite earth, and then the old way of plastering, which protects the bricks from weather, and it's also beautiful. And it's traditionally renewed every year after the rains. But often, it's so well made that it will last several years. And the binding agent is kraal manure. And so, just want to show you a few details. It's really beautiful. And that pinkish purple is an earth color. Yeah, they're all traditional. They're all natural colors. This is the view of her whole yard with Tumi. So Tumi is a really close friend of mine, but he's also acts as a translator because Motse speaks very good English, but she likes to speak Setswana when we're discussing special things, ancestral things, cultural things. So then Tumi will help me because my Setswana's appalling. Yeah, this building is so amazing. It's a very wide angle, but it's just really beautiful. And then this is Teddy. And these are the earth cakes that Motse has made, and they actually are bound with kraal manure. And I said, well, why are they here? What are they for? And she says, well, sometimes people come to use them, but she also uses them herself. And so I said, well, could I, I started talking to her about the different colors and how many different colors. And then she did take me to her own collection sites, which is knowledge that's handed down from mother to daughter. Sadly, the how would you say it? The tradition of using earth plaster on self-built homes is passing away, and the younger generation are less interested. But there are still practitioners, and it's particularly linked to the spiritual within the rural communities. If you see someone who's still using the traditional plastering system and the traditional building system, it's often linked to someone who has traditional healing or spiritual healing links to that. So I negotiated with her that I could buy some of her cakes. That I said, but I don't want you to put kraal manure in them because wouldn't be very good for my painting because I use gum arabic. So she made me some, and so these are in my studio, and in themselves they're absolutely beautiful, beautiful things. Yeah, I really love them. And you can see there's two different reds there. There's a more purplish red, which is from the north of Botswana, and then there's the more orangey red, and then there's creams, and they're lovely things. There's another, so I get a lot of my colours from Machudi, which is 50 kilometres away from Gabs. But then basically the earth colours in Botswana come from the northeast to the southeast, and that's because where all the loams and clays are. The rest of the country is Kalahari sand, and there are hidden clay beds in that, and there are beautiful fossil rivers, but I haven't. That's my next that's my next step, to go and find those. So the other people that I get earth colours from are the Letsoku traders at the Gaborone station. So they sell it either in its natural form, this is iron oxide. You can actually see the bubbles of iron in it, like those silver balls. It's like silver balls, and when you crush it, it turns into this deep, deep red, dark red, almost purpley red iron oxide, red ochre. And they also sell the powder that is formed from that, which is called letsoku. And anyone here who's wearing makeup is wearing earth on their face, because it's used as traditional. Oh, that's Elizabeth. She's the lady that sells me the iron oxide. And she's Kalanga, so she's from the northeast. And the red ochre that she sells to me is from a place called Senete. So I only use colours if I know where they're from, if I understand their location, and in a way it's a way of recognizing and honouring the place and the colour itself. So when I started trying to do my cataloguing with the different colours, I would always know where the colour was from. I would put its latitude and longitude in my artwork, and I would try and give it a name, a Setswana name. So Chibidu, Bochibidu is red. I call the Kalanga red, I call Madi blood, because it looks like blood. When it's wet, it looks like fresh blood. When it's dried, it looks like dried blood. And it smells like blood, and it tastes a little bit like blood, because it's iron, which is amazing. So this is Tepiso and a friend of hers. She's another lady and I just wanted to show you this slide to show you the traditional marketplace. So the Letsoku traders, they trade in face powders, and they work from the traditional part of the market, which is at the Gaborone station, and it's the train station and the bus station. And the traditional part is where all the traditional goods are found, like the herbs, the earths, and then some of these crafts as well. So this is it Elsie or Edith? So she's got Letsuku on her face. She's just see that little plastic bag? It's full of ground earth, and they say that it's used to polish the skin, to make you more beautiful, to change your color of your complexion, to make it lighter or redder or darker. And it's something that I've asked Motse, the lady from Machudi, and I was saying, well, wasn't it traditional for initiation? And there's such things as traditional secrets. So I think in the 5 years that I've been working with the earth colours in Botswana, I've learned how to ask, or which questions to ask at the appropriate time. Because if it's not at the appropriate time, you don't get an answer. Or she'll say, no, I didn't tell you that. You must have remembered wrong. And it's very interesting. But the wonderful thing is, the more I learn, the more questions I know to ask. In a way, asking the right questions is understanding that you're beginning to learn something. And there's so much to learn. I learn new things every day, and I'm finding that I'm becoming more and more involved with people who are working with spirituality, traditional medicine and traditional health and spiritual beliefs and cleansings, and it's a really exciting and interesting pathway. And I'm feeling as though I've always been a guest, being not African and choosing to live in Africa. It's always been looking like looking in a house through the window and seeing what's going on, and maybe sometimes getting invited in. So through my practice as an artist, I'm finding that I'm beginning to find a way into the culture in a completely different way, and in a really significant way, which is making my own practice so much more significant for me in terms of being an artist based in Botswana. So this is a view of my studio, and this beautiful grinding stone on the, dare I use this thing? Yeah, that was loaned to me by Tumi, my friend. It's his paternal grandmother's grinding stone, and it was used. He told me that his mum and his grandmother both decorated their houses, built their houses and decorated them. So that grinding stone has been used for generations, and it is beautiful. It has a very bad temper. It has sentience. And then the stone, which I'm going to bring tomorrow for the workshop, the pestle, I think you call it, is I found on my husband, the land that my husband farms. He's a horticulturist. And it's in the floodplain of the Ntwani River. And in Botswana, many of the rivers are ephemeral. So they're sand rivers. They don't have water in them generally, maybe once every 10 years. We just had amazing rainfall this year and floods in Gaborone. But so you find stone tools everywhere in Botswana. I know you're not meant to pick them up or touch them, but they're all muted because they're on these riverbeds. And in town, they are almost definitely moved from somewhere else. I don't know about the stone tools at Sanitas because it is in the floodplain, but the farming done there is done in sand. So the sand is bought from people who sell sand to build the city, and it's also used by Sanitas to grow their plants in. And with that sand comes stone tools. And so I find them all the time, and I was wondering, why am I finding stone tools on a pathway that I've walked on for 15 years, 20 years? And I suddenly realized that they're being brought in by these sand piles. It's a whole nother thing I have to research. Anyway, so this is my studio, and there's my mulling equipment, and there's another beautiful grinding stone to the left. So there are different ways of extracting the color from earth. You can take those earth cakes and you can grind them up, and then you can sieve them to get the finest powder, and then you'd grind that powder, and then you'd put it onto the polished granite, and then mull it with those glass mullers. And the mullers are not, you don't use pressure, they're a massage. So you massage the gum arabic into the ground powder to make a creamy pigment. Another way, which is that I've been experimenting with, is levigation, where you wash the color out of earth. And so you shake it all up, and you stand it for between 40 and 60 seconds, and all the gravel and the hard particles will fall to the bottom of the jar, and the pigment will be suspended in the water. So you keep the water, and you put it into a dish, and you keep doing that until there's no more color, and you're left with sand or gravel in the bottom. And then you let it evaporate, and you get these beautiful, and then they're ground and mulled with gum arabic. Okay, and so this is just an image of the iron oxide that I bought at the market, and then that's the color it is when it's ground. And it looks really, really hard, but I was taught by someone who uses this for spiritual purposes, that you take that piece and you gently nibble the edge, and it slowly just disintegrates into rubble, and then you start to grind it, and you get this stunning color. It's just, I think I'm just almost amazed by how beautiful the colors are that can come out of the earth. This is the mullahs and the polished granite. People often ask me, well, my gallery in Joburg, when people maybe are going to purchase a work, they say, well, how long do these colors last? Aren't they sort of ephemeral? And my answer is always, well, have you ever seen a faded riverbed or a faded mountain? They are the most color-fast colors in an artist's palette. So this is when I'm doing the mulling. And this is that creamy, this is the red from Machudi. And it's always this beautiful kind of morphogenesis type pattern that always appears when it becomes paint, and you can feel it. Some colors take 5 minutes, some colors take 30 minutes. It just depends. And you suddenly have this feeling that you're there. This is an array. Now, I have to admit that the blue is cobalt blue, and it's an industrial blue, man-made, and it's a process blue. That's why I use it. It doesn't lean to green or to yellow or red. It's so that when mixed with the yellows and the reds from Botswana, you get a beautiful array of just soft greens and purples. And I introduced the blue. I hope to find some kind of a blue in Botswana, and it will probably be through using indigo. There are 3 different indigo plants there. But I've never wanted to use the botanicals because they do fade. So, but I'm experimenting with that. So, and then my excuse for using the blue was that, well, it's kind of a bit like an immigrant into Botswana like me. So, and I did see a large work of mine hanging somewhere, and I looked at all the colors when I wasn't using the blue, and I thought they could almost just be brown. And so that blue, when you make the greens and the purples, okay, I've got to wrap up. It enhances. Anyway, I'm going to very quickly say I wanted to make an artwork that was made, everything was made in Botswana. So this is papyrus from the Okavango. And this is my first catalogue, and it's cataloguing all the different colours I've found so far with names of the villages. And and it's on Okavango papyrus, which is really, really a beautiful thing. Then I've also made a big panel of just swatches. They're called earthscapes, to try and really see the range of colours and what they look like. And then this is a close-up of some of those works. And I do have a video. I don't know if it's like 3 minutes, but it's of Motse painting her house. Yes? Okay, how do I get it to? Will it work as a video? Okay, great.
Aku sisan housing ya how channel how le mangot onna soft ya go tsang ha no isa tsikiri ga kirken da ko le dari ke tsweli sala ke ga wa Is it?
That's it. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I am Christa Giraso. I'm a landscape designer with Mass Design Group. And I'm really happy and honored to be here to talk about this amazing work and very rewarding projects that I worked on when I was working in Rwanda for almost 3 years. So yeah, let's dive in. So I'm from Mass Design Group, and Mass stands for Model of Architecture Serving Society. And we are a non-profit architecture and design collective dedicated to serve community worldwide. So our mission is to research, build, and advocate for architecture that promotes justice and human dignity. But we also believe that architecture is not just about building structures, it's also about restoring justice through equitable, beautiful, healthy, and meaningful designs. Our team is very diverse. It includes engineers, architects, writers, filmmakers, landscape designers, researchers, and we are all committed to use design as a tool for positive change. Throughout our journey in the past 15 years, we've collaborated with local communities, government, non-profit organizations to design and build essential structures. And we prioritize locally sourced materials, community-driven processes, and ethical labor practices to ensure that our projects not only serve the people that they are built for, but also generate long-lasting economic benefits within the regions. So diving in, our early partnership were rooted in Rwanda. This is a country that, despite its challenges as a developing country, has implemented a lot of progressive policies aimed at improving the livelihood of its people. So over the past 50 years, when we look at the demographic of the population growth in Rwanda, we notice that it has tripled from 4.3 million in 1975 to 12.6 million in 2019. And the projection indicates that it will double by 2050. So this rapid growth has placed a lot of pressure on the land resources, and this has led to significant environmental degradations. So also looking back in the early 90s, 20% of the land was used as farmland and settlement. But now in 2016, almost 80% of the land is used for agriculture. And the country has lost a lot of its forest coverage, primarily due to agricultural expansion and resettlement efforts. So at Mass Design, we have recognized these challenges when we were working in the country, and we've started integrating processes and approaches such as the One Health approach and regenerative landscape principles in all of our projects. So the One Health principle, it guides us to design spaces that are foster a healthy balance between the human health, the animal health, and the plant health. So we strive to restore this natural ecosystem of the region while also creating these dignified spaces and resilient spaces for the communities. Also looking at the regenerative landscape principles, we prioritize reforestation, soil degradation, regeneration, sustainable land use, and water conservation. This ensures that architecture not only meets immediate human needs, but also contributes to the long-term environmental health of the region, therefore playing a crucial role in healing the earth. Additionally, we really emphasize on the use of locally sourced materials, and we engage in within the community we work with training programs that empower them to explore and utilize their own regional resources. So diving in with the first project that I worked on, the Ellen DeGeneres campus of the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund. This project campus is located in the northern part of Rwanda at the base of the Volcano National Park that you see in the background of that picture. And the park is home to what we call the soft giant, the mountain gorillas. And in the design of this project, we took inspiration with the home setup of Diane Fossey in the park, where she was recording the first ever information on gorillas, to create this home for the Diane Fossey researchers and scientists. Looking at the landscape approach, we tried to recreate the habitat of gorillas on this campus. And this was going to serve as an educational way to highlight the life in the park, the life of a gorilla, and understand the different ecological system that we find in the park. So at the same time, we were providing space, platform to the researchers and the scientists of the Diane Fossey to further their studies on the plant species that are found in the biodiversity of the park that could adjust at its lower altitude. That we find that's where the campus is located. Looking at the materials that we were using on this project, we focused on using the locally available materials. So in the northern part, everywhere you look, you will see volcanic stones. So this is a stone that is very strong and also malleable to some extent. And we used it for many areas. We use that wall cladding, like pavers, bench stone, retaining walls. We even crushed small stones from site that we were collecting on site to make gravel for landscape trails. And even the big boulders that were dug out when they were setting the buildings were used as boulder seats or other stones, ornamental stones. So our history with this volcanic stone starts way back in 2011 with our first project. And since then, the team at MAS kept researching and understanding the different ways to work with this stone. And we kept using it on other projects that we worked on in the northern part of Rwanda. So being at the proximity of the Volcano National Park, it gave us an advantage to use the stones and to also learn and understand all the native species that we find in the park. And that's the journey that is kind of close to my heart. And I'd like to take you through the whole process we used on this project. So our landscape team at MAS conducted a very meticulous and comprehensive research of the biodiversity found in the Volcano National Park. And they came up with this detailed plant list of native species that grow in the park. And this list was reviewed by the botanist and scientist at Diane Fossey to ensure that it's going to provide an ecological relevance to the campus. And from this list, we started to design a planting plan of the campus that really answers all the environmental need of the area. And with this list, we started the nursery. So with the nursery, we were working with local communities to source the species that we had on the list. We had 120 species, and it took us more than a year to source these specific plants. So the local community started by looking at the campus sites, the neighboring lands that were untouched. They even got closer to the park vicinity to get some of these species. One of the challenges that we met on this phase was the language barrier, because our list had Latin names, scientific names, or English names, but everyone in the community knew this name by the Kinyarwanda name. So we had to provide a lot of pictures, and they would bring in samples, and once we approved them, they start sourcing them on a large scale. And then the botanists at the Fosse also were supporting a lot in this process, where they kept monitoring the growth of the plants that were getting on site in the nursery, but also they would provide invaluable valuable insight on where some of the species were found, or and to understand exactly the growing conditions for the species that were really hard to find. We even went beyond the northern region to find some of the species, and unfortunately a few species couldn't be found because they only grow in the park, and we didn't want to disturb that very sensitive ecosystem of the park. Along the sourcing phase, we were also propagating. So the local community was divided in two groups. One group that was sourcing the species, and another one at the nursery that was already propagating within 2 days. And we didn't have a lot of information about these species. So the propagation methods were trial, testing, failing, different times to see which one works with the perfect, what is more successful for each one of the species. So we tried to propagate as much as we can for all the plants that we needed in the design. And some species were really hard to find, to propagate. There are species that were very sensitive to human interaction. As soon as you touch them, they will change, or they couldn't adapt to this nursery environment and the campus altitude. But overall, we found 110 species out of the 120 species, and we propagated more than 300,000 plants, but the campus was planted with a little bit above 250,000 plants. So after the propagation, we started planting, and this was one of the shortest time. It took between 8 months to plant. As soon as areas were available on the campus, we started planting, and it really went very fast. So the team that we had, the community team that we had that was sourcing, propagating, is the same team that planted and kept up with the maintenance for over a year. And this was to make sure that all of these plants get the optimal growth condition, and therefore restoring the natural ecosystem that we're trying to have here. So this meticulous approach on researching, sourcing, propagation, and the planting inspired us and the Fosse team to try reforestation methods. So we had a testing plot for reforestation to understand and contribute to the long-term sustainability and ecological balance that we found in this region. The next project that I would like to talk about is the RICA, Rwanda Institute of Conservation Agriculture, and this is located in the southern part of the country, a very different ecosystem, and that's the savanna forest ecosystem. So this campus university is very uniquely positioned next to one of the remaining intact savanna woodland in the country that is not protected, that's not in a park. But however, due to the increase of the demand of arable land by the local communities, they had already started to encroach on the ecosystem on that woodland. So our landscape design on this campus was developed to solve two main purposes. The first was to restore this native ecosystem, which served as a habitat for the gray-crowned crane, one of the endemic species, birds. And then we also wanted to create this immersive learning environment where students can learn and adapt all these conservation agriculture practices. So we started by conducting an extensive research on the existing ecosystem to understand what is the biodiversity that was already in that remaining woodland. And it kind of helped us identify and understand how much ecosystem will be reintroduced once the campus is well settled and established. So on this project, we used the One Health approach I mentioned earlier, where we're promoting a balanced relationship between the human health, the animal health and the plant health. So this campus had some agricultural land, as you can see. We had agricultural land testing plots, we had pasture land. This had also classrooms, and we also had like housing for students and the staff. And all of this was to create this symbiotic system where students experience the interdependence of having all of this habitat all together. Taking as an example of the Central Spine Road, running from the east side of the campus to the west side, it was designed to provide a unique experience to the students to get to understand how this habitat work together. So on this design, we had recreational spaces such as like courts, badminton courts, volleyball courts. Those were placed strategically in between agricultural plots that were growing different types of crops. And also we had added some pockets of native woodlands and other curated garden, all of this made of native species. And we were creating a system where it's going to enhance the biodiversity and ecological resilience. So the softscape here at the RICA followed the same principles as what we had at FOSI, with a strong focus on using native species. And to achieve this, the team sourced and propagated these native species on an on-site nursery, and this followed the same principles, but it was way smoother because most of these species were already growing in this ecological system in the woodland. The other element that we looked at is the material palette at RICA. Our team carefully selected to reflect sustainability, durability, and local availability of the materials we used. And our engineers and architects focused on using timber extensively as a structural element of the building, but also earth-based material incorporating earth bricks, rammed earth walls, and clay roof tiles. But the sourcing and testing of this earth-based material required a very long, in-depth research, rigorous documentation, and a lot of extensive prototyping that took some months. And our team explored various techniques to ensure that the selected materials on this project were not only sustainable, but also cost-efficient and scalable for other projects in the country and in the region. All of this research has provided invaluable insight on how earth-derived materials can be further developed and manipulated for future application within the region and in the country. So we're getting to the part where we look at the impact of this project. Both these projects not only achieved success, but they exceeded the expectation we have in terms of biodiversity recovery. And these outcomes are a testament of the power of recreating these native ecologies. So at FOSI, for example, the reforestation of the testing plot for reforestation has shown a 95% success of this native species, and additionally, the team has been able to record the return of some endemic bird species. All of this was signaling the thriving habitat that we had created on the campus. And meanwhile, at RICA, the campus is projected to become carbon positive within 5 years of operation, and it will achieve a complete off-grid sustainability by then. The One Health approach we used on this project at RICA ensured the development of a functioning ecosystem where students get to learn in a very seamless environment all of these sustainable agricultural practices and understanding how it works with the biodiversity and the ecosystems. So beyond the ecological impact, this project also fostered a long-lasting economic and social benefit for the local communities. that were involved. Through this skill building initiative we had, the artisan builders, laborers got trained during the process, the process of the construction, and they gained these lifelong skills that's going to provide economic opportunity for them in their future projects and beyond our projects. Also, at MAS, we believe that the local capacity, investing in the local capacity, cultivate a very strong sense of ownership and belonging of the communities, and this space remain culturally and socially, economically enriching for the communities that they are serving. And at the same time, we embedded this sustainability, the research, and the empowerment of the people to restore this landscape, not only to restore the landscape, but also to strengthen the local resilience and recreating these places where nature and people can live and thrive together. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm being told we have 10 minutes and we will adhere to that. Thank you all so much. I'll dive straight into my remarks and then open up for questions from the audience. In her first short story in 1921, African-American anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston's central character writes, "Summer rain comes down like understanding and softens me. I push a blade of grass or a flower or maybe a pine tree. That's the ground thinking." Mounia, Ann, and Christa today might be conceived as landscape architects who are all thinking with the ground, alongside and through the ground. These materials that they use work slowly. They are neither quick to harvest nor quick to maneuver, as we saw with the pestle. By choosing to work with them, they remind us that the ends do not always justify the means. Rather, it is the means itself and the types of materials that we use and the way we source them that is itself a very important part of the process. Our panelists today remind us that everything we see indeed comes from the earth. The polyester fabric that is in much of our easy, non-wrinkle clothing comes from petroleum. The glass windows that line this building are made of sand. Plastics even are made of cellulose, coal, salt, and crude oil. Yet while most of the things that we use render their process of production invisible, these artists and creators today render these processes very visible. In so doing, they do the exact opposite. By creating with olive trees and gardens, with termite hills and white chalk, with stones from a volcano national park and earth-based materials, the goal is not just to think about the product, but also the mode of production as crucial to the final process. And in these pieces, as women join a chorus of people who are thinking about how to use the land. So I have just maybe 2 opening questions, and then I will open to the audience. I'm curious how your practices shape our notion of what nature is itself. Is nature natural? What does it mean to intervene in nature in all of these ways? I'm thinking, for instance, about the parks and the way you created spaces so that people could engage in nature, but then also engage in sports, right? That they're using the environment in different ways. So what does this mean about nature? Many of you also work in spaces that are crucial UNESCO World Heritage Sites or in places who have specific tourism projects. I'm curious what possibilities there are for engaging in a sustainable approach of tourism in these places as well. I have some specific questions for each of you, but I think that for the sake of time, I'll open with those general ones. So I'll share there.
Okay, I'll go first. There's an interesting question asked, did man make ochre or did ochre make man? And the use of earth for needs as opposed to wants seems to have been with us right from the beginning, maybe 300,000 years ago. Every single archaeological site has red ochre in it, and nobody knows why. And a need is food, shelter, but it's also spiritual and communal. So I would think that the earth has always offered that and been an integral part of our relationship with ourselves and our sentience. That's my answer.
Yeah, I can go next. So your question was asking about what is nature and the way we interact with nature in all of these spaces that we are creating. And I would say this is one of the most delicate thing that I've been trying to understand too. Because what we learned when we were working with these native species that are very sensitive and they grow in a certain environment. Once the environment is disturbed, it kind of have a ripple effect on everything around. So I would say that as humans, we try our best to redesign and recreate those space with the respect of what is already there and what was existing, what is working, but to keep learning. And there is a lot of patience most of the time when we're working with projects where upon completion, especially when they are native species, it requires more time for recreating that environment and climate they are used to. So it requires a lot of patience to wait and let nature come back to what it was supposed to be and what we wanted it to be. But it's also a learning curve because we've learned that what we intend to do when it comes to native species doesn't always come as it is. It keeps changing, it keeps evolving into better habitat for the system, the ecosystem, for I would say the insects, the birds, all of the way they interact with nature and how we come in kind of helps the whole system to evolve. And coming back to the other question you asked about sustainable tourism and how humans interact, I would say that there is a lot of respect we need to bring in when we come into these spaces that are very sensitive, that are the habitat of the various species. And it requires also us to create that, understand that there should be a balance, that we should be approaching delicately these spaces and respecting what is already there. With all the efforts that we put in restoring these spaces, it might take time, but it gets there from what we've learned on these two projects within maybe 2 years. And what we observed was that nature takes time, but really comes back, and we get to see the life coming back on the projects. Yeah.
Right, it certainly does take time. I was taking notes as each of you were presenting. In the example of the gardens, we saw just 5 years afterwards how the place had transformed. With the project we saw after 1 year what had happened with the forests. And then with the painting, we saw just a kind of 2 foot by 3 foot square foot area painted in 3 minutes. So a very laborious process, taking a lot of time. So that's certainly something to think about in terms of how to use these materials. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I will try to answer your question about the question of nature. We when I was student in France, there are natural nature and artificial nature, and we cannot do natural nature. It's from nature. Human, we can just do our best to preserve what exists and to increase biodiversity by use local species, nature's endemic plants. And the idea is more to make, for the question of sustainable tourism, to make people raise awareness of what exists, in terms of legacy. Legacy, it means nature, but it means all our heritage. And that's what I was working about. And people now, I always talk about, for example, trees, because we don't have enough water. It's very hot. And the first thing we have to do now in Morocco and all this very arid climate city is to plant trees to preserve our soil. And I always tell people in the cities, look at these trees, look at these old trees you see. Yes, what is? It's a tree. No, it's an old tree. It exists still generation and generation. And I made it possible to preserve it. And now the administration built a new project around trees. And now the people, it's one tree I'm thinking about in Rabat. Everybody knows these trees. This is an olive tree. Yes, we have to preserve it. And every day they walk and see it, but they never know about the history of that. We have to, it's our role is to make the people understood their legacy, natural legacy, our heritage of landscaping. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'd like to pass any extra time that we have to the audience in case you'd have some questions. Sarah, can you help with the microphone? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gabriel, and I'm a last semester in Masters of Landscape Architecture, and my question is for Joe. I'm currently working in a learning center in Somalia for my thesis project. And about the nurseries, are they used to provide the plant material for the project, or is it commercial and provide income later on?
For the sake of time, if there's another question, we'll take that right away, so folks can start thinking about their responses. Yes, please.
So in Rwanda, I'm wondering the people that are involved in helping. In Rwanda, the people who are involved in helping, are these people who have some type of educational skills? They've been, at university or something like this, or were these just people from around the countryside who had an interest in helping?
Thank you. So we have a question for Ann and Joe Christa, and we'll take one more question for the audience, and then our panelists will, in the remaining 4 minutes, compose their responses. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Berta Pantoja. I'm working in a project in Somalia who involves agriculture too. And my question here, one of the biggest challenges we know is that how to change the culture. So how do you find, how easy was, in your case in Rwanda, the people, because I noticed what all, you said they were volunteers, teach them how to do agriculture, how to move them into the agriculture area. Was this, because they're based, at least in Somalia, they're nomads. So did you find that part? That's one question. And then the second one, if you're creating these kind of places, these are legacy places which are trying to become something where are memorable and will stay within them. How did you find cultural problem to sell something that was so modern, because they're so used to the French traditions. So how do you work with that? Like bringing a more modern vocabulary rather than keeping within the tradition of French culture that, the colony culture that comes behind, like the design. That's what they're used to.
Great. We have a question for each one of our panelists. If you would reflect briefly, and we will take their last 3 minutes to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go ahead to answer to Gabrielle's question about the nursery. So for these two projects we work with, because they were very specific species that are native for a certain region, this nursery at the beginning, initially they were made for propagating and sourcing the species that we need on the campus so that we can take care of them and make sure that we plant them in good condition. And the community we were working with, they really gained a lot of knowledge from that whole process. And it was, for those that I talked to, it was their first time to deal with these native species. And looking at the beauty of it, some of them started some nurseries on the side after the project. But initially this nursery were targeted to provide plants for the campus, and also the same team that does maintenance, because some species are still in the nursery, so once they're doing maintenance, they can still take plants from the nursery. So it becomes their own. But the community we work with, they end up seeing the benefits of having that native species and the beauty of them. And you see the gap that we have between these nurseries with other nurseries in the country. So they learn that they can propagate this specific bamboo, specific palm that are very native to the region to sell them to these other big nurseries in other cities. That's one point, but we've worked with other projects who are trying to reforest the areas and with the nursery in mind to bring in that element of propagating plants for their projects. They end up being like, we will also keep the nursery for future reforestation programs that we'll have with the communities or in the region. So it can work both ways, but because they are native species, they are very unique and people start to learn how to work with them.
Thank you.
I think there was another question about the experience. Yes. So in terms of changing the behaviors, adopting new techniques, most of the time the community we work with, they are not very experienced. They come as a new project coming in the region, they look for jobs and they start to learn from what they see. And the behavior change comes when they're working on the project and they see how beneficial it is. For example, if I give an example of the Institute of Conservation Agriculture, the students are learning the best practices of agriculture, and it's kind of new. They learn it as a way to see the result, how the crops will increase. But then the casual worker who come on site to see the process, they start to implement those techniques as much as they can in their own plots at home. And I think that behavior change comes with the project, because most of the time they join in without experience, trying to gain money because they're from the region, from the area, and they end up gaining more knowledge. And some of them even start businesses. For example, those who learned how to, the engineers we worked with who learned how to make rammed earth walls, they started a whole business to make rammed earth walls in different regions of the country. So it starts within the projects.
Do we have any closing remarks from our other two panelists? Anything you'd like to say in regards to the questions or just to close out? Thank you so much. Anything?
Well, it's not very easy to answer, but I think you are talking about French tradition or French heritage. At the beginning, when I started my doctorate 20 years ago, everybody told me, why do you speak always about French garden, and why don't you speak about our Moroccan garden? They are our Moroccan garden, but they can they couldn't understand this legacy. But now, 20 years after, because of understanding the history of garden, reading about it, they still just integrated them as a heritage. And the first garden designed by the French people are the first who were protected as heritage in Morocco. They are the first garden in North Africa. It's very new. Our history is very new, and we are writing we're still writing our history. But we try to manage the balance of traditional species, traditional colors, traditional materials, traditional way of gardening, and modern. But modernity means not French. It means now. Our way of thinking the modernity of Morocco. French is a period of our history, but it's not now, yes.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining me. Before we leave, I'd just like to remind you that here at 6:30, we will be holding our keynote address. So please return to this room at 6:30 for our keynote. Please join me in thanking our panelists.